Here's the statement, which is, I'm going to go less than 2 hours old. We okay with that? We nodding? Yeah, okay. Less than 2 hours old. That the Texans owner Janice McNair, Hannah and Cal McNair, have you noticed what they've done there? We'll get to that in a second. We were shocked and deeply saddened when we first learned of the allegations against our then franchise quarterback in March 2021. Although our organization did not have any knowledge of Deshaun Watson's alleged misconduct, we have intentionally chosen to resolve this matter amicably. This is not an admission of any wrongdoing, but instead a clear stand against any form of sexual assault or misconduct. We hope that today's resolution will provide some kind of closure to the parties involved, our fans, and the Houston community at large. As an organization, we will now turn our focus to the future and doing what we can ensure respect for all. This is clever. This is 2022. I don't know what Deshaun Watson did and didn't do. I'm guessing that the Texans didn't have a supreme amount of direct knowledge, but were they covered, right? When you get sued, you got to figure out, am I covered? Do I have all my, or if somebody else gets sued, are they covered? And were they enablers in this? Okay. When I read this statement, when anybody reads this statement, something jumps out at me. Okay. First is that they led with Janice, Hannah, and Cal McNair. Janice, Hannah, and Cal McNair. Now, by many people's observation, Cal McNair is a bit seen as a bit of a goof, right? He's not as well respected, especially in the football community, in terms of how he handles and how he does things, but whatever. He took over for his father in running the team. But they led with two women, right? This is, we are settling suits that may or may not have to do with sexual assault, that may or may not have happened, that may or may not have had anything to do with being under our watch. So we may or may not have been covered, but we'll just cut you a check so that nobody can look into our books, our phone records, or our text messages. That's essentially what it is. That's what it is. Are you kidding me? Right? And I understand. I mean, like, look, in lawsuits, ironic this thing is coming up, in lawsuits, oftentimes people settle just because it's not worth going through full litigation. Right? Like, even if the Houston Texans had nothing to do with it, to get to that part, you know, you have to have people sit down with a camera and with cross-examination and be deposed. And then they got to turn over their cell phone records, and they got to turn over their emails, and they got to turn over any sort of app that might have any sort of comment that might make any sort of person look some sort of different. All of these things. So what I believe the Texans are just, this is the old CYA. Jason Stewart, are you familiar with CYA?
Yeah. Yeah, I am.
That is, yeah. Covering your backside,
yep.
And I believe they have covered their backside. There we go. This has, and in addition to it not being an admission of guilt for the Texans and simply avoiding any sort of chance, not just for litigation, but for depositions, it doesn't mean anything for the Deshaun Watson case either. Right? You can make inferences, you can have beliefs, but the reality of how the court actually sees it is different than the public perception. But they are not trying to win in the court, they're trying to win in public perception. That's why, instead of saying a letter from Cal McNair, it's a letter from Janice and Hannah and Cal McNair. We hope this resolution will provide some form of closure for parties involved. But they just said that there might be not any wrongdoing. We may not have anything. We don't have anything to do with it. And we don't even know if anything went wrong. And if something went wrong, we don't know how bad it went wrong. And we don't actually know anything about it. But we're going to cut you a check. Because it's just too much of a pain in the tuchus to go to litigation. Because when you go to litigation, whoever has the most money or the most to lose usually does. Amy Dash joins us, Fox Sports Radio legal insider, founder of Legal Justice Sports. Amy, thanks so much for joining us. So this has nothing to do with Deshaun Watson per se, but it does have to do with Deshaun Watson, where there's 30 women who said basically the Houston Texans put them at risk of Deshaun Watson, who's not been tried with any sort of criminal activity, but he did settle a number of civil disputes. Give me your thoughts on why the Houston Texans chose to settle these things.
I think this has just been a really long ordeal for the organization, and it was absolutely the right thing to do. It's not necessarily admitting any type of guilt, and they even said so in their statement. They claim that they didn't have any knowledge of the situation. Now, there was an accusation in at least one of the civil suits filed against the Texans that said at least one of their employees provided a non-disclosure agreement and was involved, and possibly the employee knew. So we don't know whether the upper management, the owners, knew. But I think it's a really strong statement, especially since it's signed by the McNairs, Janice, Hannah, who are women, of course, and Cal, all unequivocally saying that this is a clear stand against any type of sexual assault or sexual misconduct. So I think it was the right thing to do, and with the amount of money that the organization generates, it just would have been a horrible look to have to fight 30 different women in court if it even got to that. And it would have been expensive, and it's just not worth it for the amount that they probably settled for.
Yeah, and you don't have to go through any sort of, not just disclosure, but, you don't have to turn over your emails, your phones, and who knows. But it does feel like, even the listing two women's name before Cal McNair, when Cal McNair runs the franchise, it just kind of feels like a PR move, to be completely honest.
Well, that really stood out to me, too, and that's why I mentioned their names, because I saw that order as well, like you did. And I thought that was very, very interesting. And it made me think that sort of this was a move that was decided by the women of the organization. I don't know. I could be wrong. But I think it was, and maybe you're right, maybe there was just a PR team behind it. But I think it was a better look than the alternative.
I would agree with you on that. Okay, where does this have any effect on Deshaun?
Well, what it tells us is that there were 30 women who've made accusations, according to the plaintiff's attorney. They're all represented, apparently, by Tony Busby. So it means that there could potentially be several more lawsuits that are coming down the pipe against Deshaun Watson, because we know that there were 24 filed. He settled 20 of them. 4 of those cases are now proceeding to trial. So you're talking about 30. That's about 6 more people that could potentially file suits against Deshaun Watson. So I would assume that there are more settlement talks potentially going on behind the scenes with those remaining women, especially when you have an organization like the Texans that settles. And I'm absolutely not saying that money is a motivating factor, but what I will say is, for some people who have been victimized, money can fix things because it's better than nothing. Sometimes they can't get justice any other way. And, of course, sometimes people are just looking for money and nothing happened to them. We really don't know which it is here. But the mere fact that the Texans so quickly settled this, it could possibly motivate a couple or some of those women to say, I got money from the Texans. Well, this is a bit of positive reinforcement. Now I'm going to go and settle my suit against Deshaun and see if I can get money. Now, that doesn't mean that they're just out for money. They might just feel that the money redresses whatever happened to them, allegedly.
It's Doug Gottlieb Show here on Fox Sports Radio. All right, what about Deshaun in terms of his case with the league? Does this help him, hurt him, any effect?
I think it hurts the Texans, actually, in terms of the league, because I don't see how you settle with 30 different women and the league doesn't investigate and potentially impose some sort of discipline on the organization. Whether the management knew or not, the organization is liable for the acts of its employees. And there was just so much evidence that would have allowed this case to get to trial and overcome the hurdles of motions to dismiss, because you had, a massage therapy entity that was contracted by the Texans and therefore by extension by the league that was making complaints that were on record. So I think that it draws the NFL's attention over the Texans and forces them to have to do something here. And then in terms of Deshaun Watson, I don't really think it would have a big effect on the decision there because it's in the hands of a supposedly neutral arbitrator. Who knows if that's really the case? And she's, going to be examining the evidence, and we're hearing, at least from leaks, that the NFL wants at least a 1-year suspension. So I think she's just going to do what she would have done no matter what, and we'll have to see if either side appeals it. But I would expect that decision to come out soon.
Yeah, I would as well. Amy, have a fantastic weekend. You're the best. You always give us such clear thoughts, and based upon the law and based upon precedents. Thanks so much for joining us.
Well, thank you, and congratulations on your basketball team win.
I appreciate that. Amy Dash, Fox Sports Radio, legal insider, founder of League of Justice Sports. So we got 5 more to win if we want to win the gold medal. It's a lot of fun. A lot of fun. It's weird though, right? That it just feels way too PRE. I guess I can see it Amy's way, her initial way of seeing it, which is, hey, these were the women of the Texans standing up and saying, but the wording of it is not strong. The wording of it is like, hey, look, no one wants any women to be abused. I understand that we haven't, as a country, and I would even say as guys, throughout history, done a good enough job of protecting women. But I don't think there's anybody now who's like, we don't want to protect women. Of course we do. It is interesting that the team is liable for their employees when most of this, not all of it, was done in the privacy of other people's homes or hotel rooms or wherever. Now, some of it was set up by the Texans security, but even that, you would feel like, how would they know? How would they know that that's anything odd, anything different? Especially when you have a star of the caliber of Deshaun Watson.